Hi everybody, how are we? Konsakija here. This is Inspire YG. YG is an acronym for Young Generation. How has everybody been? I have not been as consistent as I would like to be, so I've been a bit of MIA. Missing in action. I'm not sure what I've missed in this YouTube world. However, I am back and I've been very much shying away from talking about topics that I'm always passionate about, and one of those topics is actually matters international student, just because there has been so many changes happening in international student world in Australia with this current government that has completely thrown me off. I really don't even know where to start. Just so many changes, so many things have happened. And if you're a current international student within Australia watching this video, please comment down below and just tell me how your experience has been in the last 1 or 2 years being an international student in Australia. I bet I'm not probably going to be able to relate with a lot of things that you say, because there's been so many changes that are happening in that international student space, but also in the Australian society at large. So before I blabber on and go I don't know where, I am going to pause here, do a bit of an intro, and then I'll come back and dive right into it. So welcome. If it's the first time here, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you can be reminded when I upload a video. I will see you shortly. So welcome back. Like I said, Inspire YG, if it's your first time here, welcome. And thank you so much for the people who've subscribed and who've always shared the experiences on this platform. I really appreciate it. However, I'm here today to talk about an article that I saw touching on some of the things that are happening within the international student world, or some of the conversations that are being held at the moment on a government level, coming down to international student or to institutions, higher institutions in Australia, right? So this article was done by a person who is an education reporter with The Guardian, and the heading is actually what captured me, because the heading actually says alarm bells over Australian universities' financial dependence on international students. And I thought, oh my God, we've always had those conversations. We've seen so many articles talking about how international students feel like they're cash cows in Australia. And it's so funny how even when I was a student, and that's a couple of years ago, you always saw those articles that had that kind of heading every time you're talking about international student and international student tuition fees and international student being a cash cow. These topics are out there. And this particular article was actually, the beginning just went right into it, and it was critics across the sector say institutions have been trapped in an unstable business model as they try to make up for loss of government funding. So Australian universities' dependence on international student fees has fueled a culture of revenue, profit, and competition, and created an unstable business model. So this is a head of a national tertiary education union who stated that, and then continued to say that critics representing various interests in the sector, I assume it's an education sector, joined in expressing anxiety at the position universities had found themselves in as the federal government aggressively tries to wind back the number of international students. So, one of the reasons why I have not even done a video lately is because some of the things that have happened have tied into immigration. Some of the issues that have affected international students in Australia in the last 1 or 2 years has actually been tied with immigration issues. And not just immigration issues, there has been immigration issues whereby there has been cuts of immigrants coming into Australia, including international students, not just people on temporary work visas, including international students, but there has also been a housing crisis, especially within the big cities, Sydney being one of them, where there has been like a housing crisis where a lot of international students are struggling to actually find accommodation if they're trying to find that accommodation outside of the universities. So because of those cuts, there has been a lot of conversation about how people's student visas have been cancelled. They're trying to apply for, they have been offered a letter, they have a letter of offer from an Australian institution and an Australian university, but when they try to apply for the visa, it's been cancelled. So those issues have been happening in the last 1 or 2 years, and I had actually planned to find one of my friends who is an immigration agent to just have a talk to him and understand what's happening in that space. And I hope that I will be able to grab him, even though I know he's very busy, but I'll try and grab him so that we can both try and decipher and grasp what's actually happening on a federal or government level. Someone has actually stated, I'm looking down on my laptop just in case someone wonders where is she looking at. So I'm just going down through that article, just highlighting some of the things that I saw, and I thought, wow, okay, well, that's interesting. So there's something I learned today called OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and OECD country by Luxembourg. So they're actually countries that are within that, the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They're actually 38 countries that have, I'm not sure what they call it, I don't know whether I sign up or are members of, what I think members of is what is accurate, of this organization. And so what this article is saying is that all the 38 countries who are part of the OECD, within all those countries, among those countries, including the UK, Canada, United States, a couple of countries in Europe, 38 of them in total, some of them are in South America and other parts of the world, all those countries combined, or actually all those countries in isolation, I suppose, Australia actually has more international students compared to all those countries. And so there's a group, there's an institution called the Group of Eight, and they are particularly reliant on international student fees, with foreign enrollment making up 47% of the total cohort at the University of Sydney, and more than 35% at the University of Melbourne, the Australian National University, the University of Queensland, and the University of Adelaide. So basically, 47% of foreign enrollments to this institution, which I reckon does focus more on research, 47% of those people within that institution are actually international students. And then universities earn nearly twice as much from overseas students as from domestic students. So average revenue per domestic full-time equivalent student was $22,996. That is last year, 2023, compared with $41,117 for an overseas equivalent student. So when the federal government released its strategy to fix Australia's broken migration system last year, international students were squarely on the agenda. So I might have to bring in my friend who is an immigration agent so that we can talk about that change that happened last year, because I haven't quite dived into it. I just know that there has been cuts within different sectors of when it comes to visa. People accessing visas, or people getting visas, and people entering Australia on those temporary visas like international student visa. So now there is an education minister who stated that the government was sending a clear message. It would act to protect Australia's reputation as a high-quality international education provider, announcing tougher minimum English language requirements and targeted visa scrutiny of high-risk providers. So, sorry, there has been a bit of conversation, or a bit of, conversation happening on a government, on a federal level, of international students coming in the country and maybe even being granted or going through the education system, but still having issues with their English language. And so obviously that has been a thing that has been brought up, and conversation about increasing the band score that they will require for you to be enrolled in an Australian university. So for example, like when I was coming here, I think you only had to get, like, at that time it was IELTS English test, and you only had to get a minimum of 6 or even 5.5, and I understand that has actually gone up, and that's just IELTS. I don't even know about the TOEFL or the PTE, as well as there being education providers who are actually not licensed, giving hope to international students when they're overseas about them coming to Australia, and then only for them to actually be scammed. So there has been those kind of conversations. So the other thing that I saw in this article was the Commonwealth proposed a cap on international students, giving the education minister unprecedented powers to limit enrollment by institution and course. So basically, Commonwealth has given power to the minister to decide this particular institution, you can only take this amount of students in this particular course. Let's say it's the health, like let's say it's nursing. So let's say a particular university, you can only take these nursing students from overseas. Completely crazy. Anyway, it's happening. And then it more than doubled the international student visa application fee from $710 to $1,600. A move described by International Education Association of Australia as death by the 1,000 cuts. So basically, I mean, visa enrollment, was it an enrollment fee? Yeah, visa application fee has come from $710 for international students to $1,600, which, my God, yes, it definitely has doubled. Even it's more than doubled. You then have someone who was actually a former deputy secretary at the Immigration Department proposing or lobbying the federal government to implement a minimum university entrance exam score. I cannot even believe. Obviously, this has not been considered yet, but he's been trying to lobby for this to happen for the longest time, because I've seen it multiple times. And his argument is that this would limit the incentive that institutions actually do get through tuition fees. And saying that they do actually get students there, not for academic excellence, but for them to get revenue. Oh man, I don't even know. Anyway, you then have another higher education expert at the University of Melbourne who actually said that Australia has been a victim of its own success in many ways. So she stated, international student revenue has provided a lot of resources, but caused inequality between institutions. This person said, also said, pointing to University of Sydney, which derives more than 40% of its total revenue from foreign enrollments, more than the funding it actually receives from the government. That is an extraordinary amount. It's brought them a huge bounty, but for the government, there's often no need to make decisions about the allocation of resources, because there's been a lot of money flowing into the system that can smooth over the government, that can smooth over the gaps. So, of $34.7 billion revenue universities in Australia received in 2022. Did you hear the figure? They actually received $34.7 billion just in 2022. 8.5 billion came from international students. In 2012, the figure was about 4 billion. So basically, in the last 10 years, international students have actually doubled the amount of revenue they actually provide the government. pretty crazy, imagining that within that year we actually had a pandemic and everything else affecting global markets or global economies. So I found that quite interesting, and I just learned today that actually let me just read the next part so that I can talk about what I learned today. The deputy chief executive of this group of 8 said the international student revenue was necessary to make up for the government underfunding of research and teaching in key disciplines such as engineering, health, and science. All group of 8 members are in the top 100 universities globally, and this reflects the support of international students' revenue to make up for the underfunding of the government. The government is making a critical mistake by using international students as a scapegoat to manage a short-term spike in migration and ease housing pressure. So basically, like I said, there has been a housing crisis in Australia, and it's mainly there is definitely more demand than supply, so there's more human beings than houses. And because we don't want people to come to Australia and become homeless, they've just decided the easiest short-term solution is to actually not grant people visas to come to a country where they don't have a place to stay. Yeah, I know it sounds funny, but actually it's a thing. And however, the people, like particularly like this deputy chief of this research institution, is one of the people who are actually going to be affected because they actually do receive a lot of revenue. They have received cuts from the government, so they're actually not receiving a lot of funding for their institutions because the government says, I mean, you're making money from international students who come to do their masters, to do their PhDs in your universities. You can actually survive with that. From what we can see, it's in billions. You don't really need the money from the government. However, the government has said there's a housing crisis and also there is an immigration issue, and we need to do this because this is what Australians want. So we don't know where you're actually going to start funding your institutions, because I know you don't have the money, but we are not allowing these students who give you the money to come to the country. I mean, if you know what I mean, it's a catch-22. Interesting stuff. Anyway, I then thought, okay, it's politics. Politics is politics. And unfortunately, international students are at the center of Australian politics because they also come under what they call immigration laws. So it's unfortunate. However, let's now talk about the students. Nobody's talking about the students other than we are bringing the money as students. Nobody's talking about their well-being. Nobody's talking about other policies around taking care of the international student welfare, wellness, mental health. That's not a conversation we all having. We all need to know whether they're coming in the country, and if they're coming in the country, are they bringing money? Anyway, someone in this article also talked, so there is an article, the same article actually talks about students' debt trap. There's a person who mentioned that there has been a massive growth in marketing and recruitment spending in recent years, but little has been done to ensure international students received adequate level of support. So there's barely any regulatory policy requiring universities to ensure the welfare of their international students. This person stated, I've taught many international students. They are a great joy to teach, but these are kids in a country without family support, without friends. English isn't their first language, and they're paying a lot of money for their degrees to not be adequately supported in what they need to achieve. I've seen students who may have plagiarized, not because of malice, but out of desperation and lack of support. Between 2016 and 2019, the Monash Graduate Association assisted with 500 academic integrity cases. Between 2020 and 2024, the number tripled to 1,500. So, there's a president of some organization who said there was a direct correlation between a student's financial circumstances and the likelihood that they would engage in academic cheating. He said he had helped international students who told him they were driven to cheat as they could not afford to repeat units because their family had already overborrowed for them to study in Australia, or because they could not afford to pay their rent. It's a last-ditch effort They don't have other options. He said, these students are working largely in isolation, new to the country with little to no social support. There's a troubling myth: international students are wealthy, but in reality, they are under heavy rental stress. They've had to take out a loan or sell a house just to pursue their studies, not to mention staggering visa costs and airfares. So I actually found that article very intriguing, and this article just came through. Today is the 3rd. It was actually posted yesterday, so it's a fairly new article, and I suppose everything that they're talking about within that article is actually recent, and it's actually recent occurrences that are happening, recent interviews that have been done, and obviously different people have been consulted or are really within the university institutions and within the government. These are conversations that are being held as we speak. And so I found that interesting, and it got me to an article that I had seen that I would want to quickly talk about. I would actually link these both articles on the description box of this video in case you would want to dive into them, just to, in case you're interested. And there is a couple of professors who actually did research not too long ago, last year. They presented this at the Australian Social Policy Conference in 2023, and they shed a light on a concerning trend, policy inaction in the realm of international student welfare. I found it very interesting because they actually so they say, despite a well-documented policy concern, a comprehensive analysis spanning from 1966 to 2023 by this particular professor of policy and society at the University of Sydney, and another one from Deakin University, another professor from University of Sydney, they revealed a startling lack of attention to international student welfare in Australian legislative frameworks. So they obviously did this presentation. They talked about the troubling times where between 2009 and 2015, there had been a lot of reports of violence against international students, and that is when a legislative action was seen to have been prompted, and they say that it didn't seem like it was a long-term commitment to safeguarding the international student welfare, but rather it was more of like a crisis. What do you call it? Like a quick fix because of an arising crisis. So, and they say the call to action was basically a need to update the regulatory frameworks to better recognize international students' rights and contribution to Australian society. They also said it's not enough for institutions to provide information on self-care. Oh, you can go for a massage, you can go for a walk, that's not enough. Concrete policy changes are required to ensure the welfare of international students. Some of the concrete recommendations that they had, they highlighted the potential action that the government could take to actually address these issues effectively. First, considering the support needs of international students in the policy development process is crucial. Secondly, they proposed guidelines for institutions to address specific needs of international students. Moreover, making mental health strategies mandatory for tertiary providers with a focus on international students, then they say this could actually enhance the well-being. However, the government had a response. So the spokesperson of the Australian Department of Education responded to those concerns, and they emphasized the government commitment to international student safety and welfare. They pointed to the Education Service for Overseas Students legislative framework, which addresses these issues through various acts and standards, including the Higher Education Support Act of 2003 and the Higher Education Standard Framework Threshold Standards of 2021. They stated that the ESOS which is the Education Service for Overseas Students Registrative Framework Act and related registration, they say that it had been amended to provide stronger safeguards for international students. And these amendments required education providers to offer support to students irrespective of their mode of study, whether they were part-time, they were full-time, and provide information about work rights and support services. Additionally, there were other measures there to protect students who are under 18 as well, including regular checkups of their accommodation and third-party arrangements. So basically, the conclusion of that of that presentation was the research finding highlight a critical policy gap in Australia's approach to international student welfare, or the government claims to prioritize students' safety and well-being. The historical registrative records tell a different story. As Australia continues to attract international students, it is imperative that comprehensive and proactive measures are taken to ensure their welfare, recognizing their contribution to the nation's education and cultural fabric. I thought I'd share that because I thought, I mean, it's amazing that it took this research to bring about some of those things that international students are always aware of. I mean, just look at the COVID response what was the COVID response for international students when COVID hit Australia? The Prime Minister at the time actually told international students to pack and leave the country, and the borders were shut. So I feel like things have not always been easy for international students, and I feel like in these times, especially these unprecedented times, things are still not easy, and I feel like a little bit more can actually be done for a cohort that actually brings so much, to a point where a government does not see a need to fund does not see a need to fund public universities because of the amount of money, the amount of revenue those institutions are generating from international students or from overseas students. It's actually crazy. It just tells you they are literally solving a government crisis or a government issue. That is a cohort that needs to be taken care of, whether or not it's looked at from a capitalist point of view. These are still human beings and far away from their country, far away from their families, having to sacrifice so much. Not every international student comes from from a well-to-do background or from backgrounds where they don't know what to do with their money. Some people sacrifice, some parents, give up everything for their students, for their children to study in Australia. And so a little bit more can be seen in terms of supporting their well-being, supporting their social life and whatever else that they need to actually achieve with that which brought them to this country. So I thought I'd share that, and I hope this video wasn't too long. I just thought I haven't spoken about this topic, international student matters or current trends or what is being spoken in that sphere for quite some time. And I thought, let me just address this, and hopefully someone who is interested at home somewhere in any country deciding to study overseas can actually make informed choices with some of this information. So hopefully that was helpful. Please share down at the bottom of this video if you're a current international student in Australia or in any other country, and let me know what are your experiences at the moment, because I feel like life post-COVID has been very different for overseas students as opposed to pre-COVID. There has been massive changes, and it would be nice for people to learn from each other. If you're an international student in Australia at the moment, I really commend you for actually being there, for making it here, and for everything that you do. I know that it's not easy, but I can assure you, having walked that journey, it's actually all worth it. So don't give up. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on your desire, your pursuit. It doesn't matter how hard it gets. We are stronger than that. So yeah, thank you so much for popping in. I don't want this video to go on and on and on, but I appreciate you for watching, for being here. Please share this video with anybody, any international student in Australia, any person, wherever you are in the world, aspiring to actually study in Australia. Share this video so that people can stay updated and so that people can actually make informed choices for the countries that they want to actually study in. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, please. and share this with your friends and your networks. And I appreciate you for being here. And until the next one,